Well, thanks for joining. I think there's already lots of content in the world that's sort of pre-prepared spiels and podcasts. And so we thought it'd be fun just to do a very open-ended session and to discuss whatever is top of mind for all of you. I was sitting in the audience here not that long ago. I was told that it was apparently now 21 years ago, which time flies. I've been spending some time walking the hall here, and the standard of your work, your projects, is extremely impressive. And I think that you guys are going to accomplish incredible things in the years to come. But without further ado, as you heard, we have 3 mics, and I'm just going to kind of rotate across them. We'll just kind of shift left each time. Maybe we'll start over here, and we can go in any direction.
My name is Jeremy Joby. I am from CBS Lucan, and my question is, what was your second entry into the BT Young Scientist, and what inspired you to do it?
What was my second entry? I guess, I mentioned Isaac yesterday. The second entry was a new programming language. So, hands up here who's into programming or software development. Okay, see a bunch of hands go up. Anyone into Lisp programming? Oh, I see one hand go up. I'll try to find you afterwards. So Lisp is many people say that Lisp is a dead programming language, but the Lisp defenders say that it's not dead, it just smells funny. But Lisp is actually a programming language originally created for AI development back in 1958, so a very long time ago. It wasn't really used much back in 2005, which is when I entered that project. And so I tried to create a new version of it that was sort of optimized for modern web application development and building sort of applications in the 21st century. It was called Chroma, and that's what it was. Cool. All right, we'll go here and then over there.
My name is Harish Amaladi, and I'm from Westmeath, and I study in Marist College. My only question is, what actually inspired you to start out Stripe?
What inspired me to start Stripe? It was sort of, it was a couple of things kind of came together. Just really compressing it. As you just heard, was really into Lisp, and then because of that, I had the chance to go to the US. I went to the International Lisp Conference at Stanford in 2005, and that sort of inspired me to go to college in the U.S. So I was in transition year when I did Chroma, and so decided sort of for 5th year to try to apply to school in the U.S. and ended up there. And then I met some people who'd started a startup, and I thought, that seems very cool, and they didn't seem like some other celestial genius. I felt like, people, they seem like normal people, someone could do that. And so John and I decided to start a company together. He was actually in transition year himself at the time. And that company was kind of a partial success. It ended up being a small acquisition. But in the course of doing that, we learned that everything to do with, it was becoming really easy to build an app or to launch a website or whatever. But anything involving generating revenue, moving money, was really clunky and old-fashioned. Like you had to literally go to the bank in person and sort of fill out a mortgage application, or it kind of felt like that if you just wanted to get paid for your app. So anyway, we kind of discovered this problem, and we decided to build Stripe to solve it, initially for people like us. Just if you're a developer working on a side project, you just want to get paid for it. So I think the meta lesson is just something around, as you hear that story, there's a lot of kind of twists and turns in it, and I think there's just something about following your curiosity and being open-minded about where it's going to lead. But there was no grand plan that led to Stripe. It was just kind of a sequence of fortunate accidents. Cool. All right, let's head over here.
I'm Anastasia and I'm from Inver College. Do you have any tips on how to start your own business?
Tips on how to start your own business. Well, I think the thing that, well, I'll say two things. I dropped out of college. I didn't finish. So did John. But Tommy, the youngest, he graduated, so at least some dignity in the family. But I'm not, I'm not an advocate of ever really dropping out of college, and I think there are some businesses and some domains where the first thing to do and the most important thing to do is to become extremely technically deep in some area, and often that takes a very long time. And so, now I mentioned ARC yesterday, this biology research organization that we started. Some companies have already spun out of ARC, and we'll see, but it's possible that in the future, some company that spins out of ARC that one of the people there starts might be extremely important. Maybe I mentioned that humanity has never cured a complex disease. Maybe one of the companies will do that. If that happens, I'm certain that the person who starts it, I'm really sure, is going to have been studying biology for 10, 15 years. At the minimum, maybe much longer. Patrick, Sue, and Silvana, the two biology co-founders at ARC, they both started seriously pursuing biology at around your age, and then we started together in their early 30s, and so it was kind of 20 years of serious biology study before they're ready to start ARC. So I'm bringing all this up because I think there are categories of companies that might be really important in the world where you just need a huge amount of domain expertise to start, and I think it's easy to kind of come across the stories of some of these software people and think, I should just go do it immediately, And in some domains that can work, but not in all domains. And the world benefits from software, but it also benefits from innovation in lots of other areas. So that's just kind of the first thing I'd say. And so maybe the kind of lesson there is, if you're interested in one of those things, I think it's hugely admirable and important to really go deep. And then the second thing is, and maybe it's related, is I don't think that all the stuff around, how you incorporate a business or how you raise money or how you hire people, whatever. That stuff is necessary. You have to figure it out, but it doesn't tend to predict that much how successful a business is. I think what matters is just how important, how good, how useful the product is. And I think that it's much more likely to come from curiosity than from sitting down and saying, I want to start a business and kind of going at it head on. And so I know I keep coming back to it and maybe to the point of repetitiveness, but I really think this kind of characteristic of honing your curiosity and just figuring out what it is that compels you in particular. Like what compels you that doesn't compel the people next to you. Just like what's true to your interest. I think that's at the heart of it. All right, but back over here and we'll head over there. And sorry, you guys have the misfortune that normally if John and I are doing one of these things together, he'll make faces at me or escalate to physical violence if needed if I'm going on for too long. So you guys can just make faces at me if I'm droning on. All right, look over here.
I'm Felix from Claustrophodric CBS. How did you manage to spread your business globally?
How do we manage to spread globally? It kind of spread itself. I think that's the thing with the internet where, it's the internet doesn't care much, kind of the geographic, nationality of the atoms any user happens to be sitting on top of. And obviously it's a bit different in financial services, right, where there's different partnerships and regulatory regimes across different countries. And we did have to do some work there. But the core essence of Stripe is a product that naturally appeals to internet users, developers, entrepreneurs, startup founders, anywhere. And so it was really just a matter of responding to demand. But it didn't feel like we were sort of working hard to persuade people in France or whatever to kind of take Stripe seriously. It was more just doing the work to satisfy the appetite. And maybe Stripe is, again, I think internet software businesses are a bit different. Like if we were building a car or something, I'm sure we'd have to work much harder to build a manufacturing plant for the French market or something. But for internet businesses, it tends to be much more, I think, pull rather than push.
So my name is Oisin Jackson, and I'm from Mary Immaculate Secondary School in County Clare. And communication during the judging interviews is one of the most important parts of the Young Scientist. And as you've won the Young Scientist, I'm wondering, did you have any strategy going into the interviews or any game plan, or did you just wing it?
Well, it's 21 years ago, so my memory at this point might be unreliable. But I don't recall any strategy. I'm not sure. Maybe more craftily strategic people might have a good plan or something, but it was a bit, as we just were talking about, it was a bit of an obscure project, right? So I was trying to make sure that they just understood what it was, but I think, the judges here are, and hopefully you guys have seen this, they themselves are very curious people. And so I don't think they're looking to be, bamboozled with, fancy words and flourishes. I think they just want to understand, what the essence of whatever the thing is. And I think any strategy just needs to be, how do I make sure that, the mistake people, and this goes for startups, I think it goes for judging in situations like this, goes for lots of domains. The main communication mistake people make is they're just confusing. They're like, I have ingested 5 minutes of words, but if someone else just asked me to describe what's going on here, I would do a bad job of it. And I think the number one thing to think about, again, not just here this week, but just in general for a lot of these communication challenges, is how do I make sure, number one, that I'm not confusing? If you do that, I think you're doing pretty well.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lee, and I go to Inver College. Oh my God, I go to Inver College, and we have to choose our leave and cert subjects in a few weeks. I was wondering what subject that would involve science would you suggest to do, and what would be the most fun to learn?
Which is the best science?
Yeah.
Basically, okay. The best science. When I was in school, I was by far the most interested in physics and applied maths. Does applied maths still exist?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So physics and applied maths. But that was kind of just me and how my brain was wired. I will say I thought biology was terrible. I thought biology was just about memorization and these sort of 19th century unlabeled etches of various animals and trying to remember the terminology for their ocular organs and so on, and sort of stamp collecting. And I was completely wrong about biology. It's so interesting, and it's kind of the original nanotechnology. And if you just look up these little organelles or these kind of new renderings that have been created of different parts of the cell and so on. It's incredible. And then obviously with genomics, you have this amazing intersection of digital systems, like the genome is a digital representation of an organism, and this incredible machinery for projecting this digital encapsulation. And it's only, like the human genome, it's only 3 gigabytes, and somehow, we're all compressible into that. Yeah, anyway, I really misjudged biology. But chemistry is pretty good too. I think actually one of the, people always talk about, how will AI matter in the world? For example, the world spends a lot of its, a large fraction of its total energy use on converting chemicals from one form to another, right? That's the Haber-Bosch process for making fertilizer, or everything to do with hydrocarbons and energy. It's a big task, and part of the alchemy of these conversions is went on too long. But all these sciences are great. Part of the alchemy of these processes is catalysts, right? And obviously, there's a very interesting question of whether you can use AI in the physical domain to create better catalysts for reducing the energy barriers in these conversions. So I think the unfortunate reality is it just comes down to your curiosity.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, we'll do one more sweep through.
Hi, my name is Trinity Karthik, and I'm a transition year student at Athlone Community College. I'd just like to start off by saying that you're such an inspiration, and I look up to you a lot. My question is, if you are 16 today and are deeply interested in engineering and technology, what would you spend the next 5 years optimizing for?
If I was 16 today.
Yes.
I think well, look, it depends what your goal is, right? And everyone should not have the same goal, but you can be. You're 16. You said in 5 years. You can be, by the time you're 21, you can be truly a world expert in almost anything. You can't be a world expert in everything. It takes time to gain breadth, right? And so it's not, there'll be the best person in the world by age 40 will know more than you will know at age 21. But by age 21, in any kind of single area, you can know about as much as anyone in the world does. And so I would just encourage you to sort of set your sights high. It's not about knowing what's in the textbook. It's not about getting an A on the exam. It's not about even accelerating through the university syllabus. It's possible, again, especially with all the materials available today, to be the world expert, or at least, on that level in an area of your choosing. The question then becomes, what's that area? What intrigues you the most? And that's a very subjective thing. And obviously it might change. Maybe you become, really expert in X or Y, but then you realize in the course of doing that, well, actually there's this other interesting thing over there, and I want to really shift field. Like Eric Lander, who led the Human Genome Project, when he was 21, he was a mathematician, or working towards becoming a mathematician, and now he's working on nuclear fusion. And so, these things can obviously change with time, but the skill of going deep and, really immersing yourself in one of these domains, that generalizes well. And so, if you're 21 and you know a lot about X and you realize, I want to be over on this hill over there instead, you'll be able to, the traits and the characteristics that go into that are very repurposable. So I would just set your sights high and pursue whatever it is seems most compelling to you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi there, my name is Arjun Gambhir. I'm from Madden College, Dublin. And just to give you a bit of context, me and a few of my friends did a program called Patch a few months ago, where I visited Stripe headquarters every now and then. But fast forward now, meeting you and asking you a question one-to-one is really honest, so it's an amazing experience. My question is, how do you think Young Scientists exhibition will evolve in the next few decades? Especially now, using AI has become a significant part of people's project for research. And would you say that in future, collective intelligence or soft skills, as they say, would be judged rather than the individual intelligence or the hard skills that is today?
Well, I'm delighted you had the opportunity to go through Patch. They do fantastic work, and we're very honored to support them. and you should check out their booth if you haven't. Well, this is our first year, helping to put on the show, and so it's probably a bit presumptuous of us to, stipulate what it should look like decades hence. It may obviously be the case that, as you suggested, that soft skills become more important, and some of the maybe we can offload more of the problem reasoning to the models and the AIs. That entails an assumption that the greatest complementarity of humans is going to be in the soft skills rather than in the problem selection or the oversight or the ability to orchestrate multiple AIs or right? And so I think it's too soon to say, basically. We've had AI in the form of these language models now since late 22, right? So we're, call it, just over 3 years in. And I don't think it's true today that soft skills are the differentiator. So again, that might be the case, but I hear a lot of things said about AI where I'm very skeptical, not because I'm confident that they're wrong, but just because I think it is very premature to have that degree of certitude. To me, the aperture of possible outcomes seems very wide, and to me at least, and look, maybe this is a cop-out, I think a position of kind of epistemic humility about, we don't know, seems kind of wisest. And I feel this way about other domains, like crypto. Like in crypto, it's very. Do people here trade crypto, hold crypto? Yes, see some hands. Okay. And what do you use to trade crypto? Stocks? Okay, well, we'll follow up. But so anyway, all these crypto people, are often going on about how crypto is going to take over the entire economy, and it's only sort of traditional troglodytes that are still using, normal currencies. Everything's going to be Bitcoin and Ethereum in the future. And I think those people are a bit delusional, not in the sense that that's definitively not going to happen, but just how could you know? How could you be that confident, right? But similarly, you'll hear these people who dismiss it. It's this ludicrous casino and this sort of contemptible cesspool of degeneracy. And I think that's also misguided in that it's oblivious to a lot of the interesting technical properties of crypto and so forth. So anyway, I think across all these domains, people love certainty and they love the hauteur of some high conviction point of view. But I think in so many of these domains, we just don't know.
Hi, my name is Simson Matunja, and I go to St. Joseph's in Navan. And my question is, what advice would you give to young individuals who are interested in science and want to pursue and be in the scientific industry, or want to pursue another major and be in your position, or want to start an organization like Stripe?
Well, my advice, I think, is maybe even for both, is this idea we keep circling around here, around following your curiosity. And look, the good news is if you're here, which you are, you clearly are curious. You wouldn't be here at The Young Scientist if you aren't. And so I think it's that and working hard. And to the thing we were just discussing about being the world expert at 21, it's about sort of internalizing that thanks to the internet and everything that we have access to, you're not the ceiling is not what the person who's most interested in X in your school is like, or even in the country. It's, find the best people in the world. Make friends with them, see what they're interested in, see how they're doing it, watch their YouTube videos, go travel, meet them. if you can, and follow the thread. But I think it's first taking a stance on what do you care about and where do you want to be.
Hi, my name is Aditya Surendran from Athlone Community College, and my question is, if you had to start Stripe all over again, what would you do differently?
Start Stripe all over again. That sounds terrible. There's so much work. Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, which is currently the largest company in the world by market cap, was recently asked in an interview if he had known how much work NVIDIA would be, would he start it again? His answer was absolutely, definitely not. No chance. What do I do differently? There's a million small things, right? We made mistakes every day that now, with the benefit of hindsight, we could fast forward through and avoid. But overall, I think that it's hard to be too fussy when it works out. But I think the key things to get right are working with somebody or a group of people that you really enjoy working with and derive fulfillment in working with for a long time. And 15 years in, John and I still we disagree constantly, but love working together. And I think you want to choose a problem space that you're not going to get bored of, basically. I sometimes come across people who they've started a company doing X or Y, and it's kind of working, and that's great. But they don't love the problem area, and that kind of the company success is almost a curse, right? Because now you're trapped. You're not literally, you can quit, but now you've customers, and you've employees, and you've investors, and you feel some obligation, not just give up. And so I think you want to make sure that the problem area that's actually rewarding and that actually sort of speaks to you. I think that working with the world's entrepreneurs and developers and new companies and the innovation frontier and everything, it's 15 years in and have spent 0 days bored with that. And then I guess the third thing is you just want to choose you want to choose an ecosystem, a market where it's big enough, and we can build something interesting. And in hindsight, we ended up with that at Stripe. But and so I think the fact that those three things ended up okay, again, it's hard to complain too much. Yeah, we're extremely lucky, and maybe if we're doing it again, maybe we'd set up the dual headquarters in Ireland even earlier. We established that in 2019, if I remember correctly. But for the first 9 years, we were more US-centric. And we've been hiring some really great people here, so maybe we do that even sooner.
Thank you.
Hi, Patrick. I'm Sam. I'm from Patrician Secondary School in Newbridge. And I was just wondering, so obviously you're a very successful person, and you've met other very successful people. And what is it that motivates very successful people like that you've met, and yourself as well?
Motivates them. Interesting question. I think for the vast majority, and certainly speaking for myself, it's just a kind of love of the game and it being fun to do these things, right? In that, there's an interview recently, I think it was last week, with Sergey Brin, one of the two founders of Google. And he described how he retired at the beginning of COVID and very quickly became stultifyingly bored and is now back working in the office at Google. But like, if ever there was someone in the world who didn't need more money, it's Sergey. Like, any terrestrial material good that can be obtained, Sergey can obtain. And of everything on planet Earth that one can do, the thing that Sergey has chosen to do with his time is to go into the office and go to work. And Google doesn't need him. I'm sure his contributions benefit Google, but manifestly Google can do just fine in his absence. It's not like Google was headed into a mountainside and he came back out of a sense of duty. Google was doing very well, and Sundar was leading it well, is leading it well. And so, yeah, I think that, I think, there's lots of discussion in the world about work-life balance and burnout and overwork and stress and all these things. And to be clear, those things are real. And if you're kind of over-applying yourself to something that's boring or that you don't derive fulfillment from or you don't have agency in, that is in fact a very unpleasant experience. And so I'm not saying they don't exist. They do. And I would hate to be spending 18 hours a day working on something that I didn't like or didn't care about. But if you do like it and you do care about it, really immersing yourself in something and seeing how far you can get and what's possible and how far the frontier can be pushed, it's so much fun. And it's so rewarding, and it's such a, if you can end up in that situation, it's just such an amazingly compelling experience. So I think that's the motivation. And sometimes I'll come across some of these super successful people who have retired and who aren't like Sergey, who didn't kind of quickly realize the error of their ways and go back to work. And to me, they seem like sad stories. They have a bit of the energy of an animal in the zoo, sort of with this desultory plodding around, as compared to the vitality of those who are engaged day to day. And look, everyone's different. Everyone has slightly different motivations and all the rest. And then motivations can change. Like maybe somebody starts doing something because they think it'll be remunerative and lucrative, but then they realize that it's actually really interesting. But I think I don't really know Michael O'Leary, but if you look at Michael, how many years has he been running Ryanair now? I mean, since the 90s, and I think the man just loves running Ryanair, right? It's so much fun building, by certain metrics, the world's most successful airline. And it extends beyond business too. So that's my sense.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Tomas Downey and I go to Neurosis Community School, Donegal. My question is, what was your biggest mistakes starting out and throughout it? And what would you do to tell young people how to avoid them?
My biggest mistakes in starting Stripe and how to avoid them, yeah. And how to avoid them. I mean, there was a whole sequence of changes in direction leading up to Stripe, in that I started college in the US, and then started a company which, as I mentioned, it was a small acquisition, so it didn't outright fail, but we didn't really love the problem area, and the company was not, by any objective measure, a huge success. It never got to any significant amount of revenue, so in that sense, it was a mistake. And then I worked for the company that acquired it for a while, and then I moved to Europe for a little while, and I was working on developer environments and Mathematica and things like that. And then I went back to college, actually, for second stint, did another year. And so I think if you'd met me when I was 20 or 2021, you'd sort of look at this CV and all these changes and wonder, what's this guy doing? Does he know what he's doing? And in some sense, the answer was no, right? In that I was sort of trying to figure out what, did I want to become an academic? Did I want to become a professor? Did I want to start a company? Did I want to do something else? I don't know. And then in late 2009, we started Stripe. But I started college in early 2006, or mid 06. So it was kind of 3 years of chopping and changing. And so in some sense, that was a sequence of mistakes. But then the flip side is, I think that various experiences I'd had were quite formative. Starting the first company gave us the idea for the second company, and all that time spent with those developer environments was very influential in how we built Stripe and kind of the perspective we brought to bear. So in another sense, it's actually kind of hard to call them mistakes. I'm not sure what to kind of extrapolate or extract as implicit advice from that. It's always hard to know because any one of us, we're n equals 1 sample. You kind of want to run the machine 1,000 times and look at all the different paths and sort of see what happens before you presumptuously put it forth as advice. But at least for me, speaking personally, I think this idea of being kind of attentive to what do you care about, what are you curious about, what are you interested in, even if the path at the time doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense, and working very hard in that moment while you're doing it. Like, it's easy to maybe tell yourself a kind of sort of a sympathetic story where maybe you're kind of exploring your interests, but actually what you're doing is I've known people like this, is kind of just taking it easy and letting yourself off the hook a bit. And look, again, everyone can live whatever life they want, so maybe that's the right thing for them. But I think the right orientation is something like be really figuring out that curiosity compass, but that at any given moment you're moving with intensity towards whatever the thing is. But yeah, I think for me there were 3 years of mistakes that then set us in the right context and situation to start Stripe.
Thank you.
All right, and there's a tight schedule here, I know, so we're running up on time, so we'll do one more run through, and then we'll have to wrap, although maybe I'll see some of you on the show floor.
Hi, I'm Katie. I just wanted to ask, what new or emerging technologies are you most excited about now, and why?
What new and emerging technologies I'm most excited about, and why? Well, the one that's very top of mind right now is everything to do with single cell sequencing and what that makes possible. So we sequenced the human genome back in the 90s, but that was like you take a whole bunch of human cells and you mush them together and you sequence the aggregate. But individual cells differ quite a lot in their gene expression levels. So you've inter-cell heterogeneity. And only over the last couple of years has it become possible to sequence those cells at the granularity and specificity of individual cells. And to do that efficiently and at scale and so on. And that's really interesting because, hopefully, we'll see, it'll enable us to understand cells are the unit of organization of life to a substantial extent. And so for the first time, we sort of have a telescope at the right zoom level to understand the building blocks of the human body or indeed any other body. And so I think that's really interesting, single cell sequencing. And so often, the telescope precipitates the scientific revolution, but so often a breakthrough in conceptual understanding of science is preceded by a new instrument, a new telescope, so to speak. And then another one, also a tool, is foundation models outside of language models. So foundation models, the term given to the large language models behind ChatGPT, but you can also have foundation models in other domains. And so at Stripe, we have trained a foundation model on transaction data, and that works really well for doing things like detecting fraud, or just helping us understand the activity in the ecosystem. And then at Arc, we've trained a foundation model on genomic data, and that turns out to be a really powerful, in fact, a paper just accepted to Science last night at Arc that uses a foundation model we trained last year to generate new biological insights. So anyway, I just think this new phenomenon in the world of the foundation model is incredibly compelling and interesting and powerful. And so both those are pretty exciting. All right, second penultimate question.
Hi, my name is Connell O'Reilly. My question for you is, as the CEO of a fintech company, how do you find the balance between maintaining your own infrastructural control and adopting some of the more decentralized tooling that exists now?
When you say decentralized tooling, what are you mentioning?
Systems like Ethereum for the financial system.
I see. I guess again we're kind of skeptical of central planning and being too high conviction in our own kind of preconceptions here. And so we're really active in crypto. We're working on our own blockchain called Tempo that'll launch this year. We just launched the testnet last month. We acquired a company called Bridge that builds stablecoin orchestration functionality, a company called Privy that organizes wallets. Hey, we're doing lots of stuff in crypto. And then, what fraction of Stripe's activity will be kind of crypto-y, decentralized-y things in 10 years versus more fiat-y things? I don't know. It's kind of for the world to decide. And I think part of what's fun about working on developer tooling is that you don't have to have a definitive preconceived notion here. You can sort of build these inputs that can be recombined, and it's kind of the world that'll decide what the ratios are.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, last question.
Hey, Patrick. I'm Aditya Joshi, here at Patch, and also was on the SF Fellowship in the summer.
Oh, awesome.
People always emphasize of picking the right co-founder, and you've obviously built such an empire with your sibling, with Stripe. I actually have a brother that I quite look up to as well. Is there anything notable that you've learned with working with your sibling in such a professional manner?
I don't know if it's an empire. It's more like an overgrown broom closet. But what have I learned about working with your brother? Well, our conflict resolution techniques have definitely advanced over the years. Not as much, scuffling on the floor. It is good working with your sibling in the sense that, candor, I think, is kind of easier because generally siblings are they're rarely accused of being insufficiently direct with each other, and that really does help. And then look, I think there's part of a lot of whether it's in science or in companies or in other domains. I think part of the challenge is you sort of need this superposition of emotional states Where on the one hand, you need to have a kind of conviction that this is going to be great. We're going to solve all the problems, and this will be just so fantastic when we actually make it work. And simultaneously, you need to be so discerning and so self-critical in terms of all the problems that you perceive. Because if you're oblivious to the problems, then the thing will in fact not be that great. And so it's this kind of this juxtaposition of conviction and pessimism, and optimism and pessimism. And I think that's an unusual combination of emotional states. And it's more important, I think, in a new thing because you don't know the thing. If you're solving a problem in a book, you know the problem is solvable. But if you're doing a new thing, you don't know whether it's even solvable. So you need to kind of have this self-belief. And I don't know, it's not like I have that many, again, different data points and samples, and there are lots of successful companies started not by sibling pairs, so it's clearly not necessary. But for me, I have found somehow maintaining that juxtaposition to be easier when working with somebody that you know so well.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, well, look, thank you so much for coming out. I really hope that you guys are enjoying the exhibition. I'll see more of you on the show floor. And I guess we shall reconvene tomorrow evening for the final celebration. So.